Day one at MIX, pretty exciting stuff. Hope you guys all enjoyed the keynote. I know I sure did, and I appreciate you choosing the Orchard session as your first breakout to attend. My name is Bradley Millington. I'm a program manager at Microsoft, and I'm also the project lead for the Orchard project. And today I'm going to show you kind of a breadth view of what Orchard can do. We're going to go a little bit in some more detail than what you saw in the keynote. And also, I want to say that Orchard 1.1, just shipped, and so it's available today. And most of what you're seeing today is hot off the presses and straight from that new build. So pretty exciting stuff. Thank you. The one guy that likes it. Thank you, thank you. Sympathy applause is always good. So what did we do in Orchard 1.1? We really focused on about sort of 4 key scenarios. For one, we wanted to make it really, really fast to get started with Orchard. Hitting the setup screen, configuring the modules and themes that you want in your site. Kind of before you get started building the site, there are things you want to pull down, extensions you want to install, settings you might want to enable, things along those lines. And we recognize that in Orchard 1.0, that was very much kind of a manual process. You could drop modules in manually, download them manually from our gallery. But we really wanted to focus on making Orchard faster to get started. So I'm going to show you some features today that really automate that whole kind of initial setup of the Orchard site using a new feature called recipes. Second, we really wanted to make Orchard simpler to configure overall. And to do that, we've given the admin panel a fresh new design, a fresh new look, and also really paid attention to some of the usability of Orchard and kind of the workflow as you go through the admin panel. So that was another really key area of investment. We looked at extensibility and customization scenarios, both from a developer point of view and from a designer point of view. And so we listened to the folks on the forums that were trying to override certain behaviors in Orchard. We certainly tried to make Orchard extensible from the very beginning. And Orchard itself is built on the very modular extensible framework that we expect the community to participate in and add to. But a lot of people were trying to hook in and plug into things that were deeper into the framework and kind of difficult to override, whether it's our authentication system or navigation system, some of those deeper things. So we really took a hard look at those things and tried to fix as much as we could in what we were getting from the community feedback from 1.0. And secondly, we looked at things from a designer perspective. What does it take to customize the front end of Orchard, to really deeply customize themes, the placement of things, overriding certain templates. And we've got some great new features that I think you'll be really excited to see that makes that very, very easy and really kind of brings to light how Orchard's rendering system works. And lastly, we've paid attention to deployment and hosting. In particular, what does it take to publish, whether it's from WebMatrix or from FTP or from Visual Studio. And we also looked at scenarios about exporting data from your site, transferring that to other sites, and rehydrating other Orchard sites. So we paid some attention to that as well. Helps with staging and production kind of workflows, as well as thinking about the characteristics of Orchard in shared hosting environments. So that's a glimpse at 1.1 and a glimpse at what you're going to see today. I want to first give you a little bit of context about Orchard itself, and then we're just going to jump right into the demo. I'm going to build a site from scratch using Orchard 1.1. So the title of the talk sort of indicates that we're going to build. We're going to go and customize a site, build a complete site. We're going to extend that site with some custom modules, and then we're going to try to ship that site out to the web. So brief context on Orchard. I've mentioned 1.0 a few times. So Orchard was started in November 2009. It was announced at that time, and at that point we had almost not a line of code. We spent about a year developing the 1.0 release. We went through a set of phases where we sort of started with the core infrastructure, moved to some developer extensibility scenarios, then to some designer scenarios and the theme rendering system, and lastly with some end-user functionality that we shipped in January of this year. And at that time, we simultaneously launched a gallery of module extensions, also empty in January, but it quickly filled up. So you can see the Orchard site here. I'll click on the gallery. And we have now 171 unique packages in the gallery. That's a combination of modules and themes that are there. And if you look at the modules specifically, you can see we have a number of modules, 126 modules submitted, both by the Orchard team and by the community. The predominant number of them contributed by the community. So we're really excited to see that level of uptake on the 1.0 release in just a few short months. 1.1 was 3 months later, and we really just kind of focused on all those things that I talked about. We think that's going to really help kind of propel the momentum of the project. So the gallery's an open source project in its own right as well. This is running on Orchard itself. It's also powering the NuGet.org site, for example. And there are some folks in the community that have used the same code base to set up their own galleries. So that's sort of a tangential project related to Orchard that we're working on. And so we're going to see a bit more of the gallery as we go. As we're looking at the gallery here, I also want to just call attention. To kind of incentivize folks to extend Orchard, we announced a competition. We call it the Orchard Module Challenge. And that was announced in February. And it just concluded, and the winners just announced today at MIX. You may have noticed some slide rotating it prior to the keynote and here on the site. I just want to congratulate the folks that participated in that contest. We really appreciate the contributions. And first place here went to Piotr for his advanced menu control. The default menu control in Orchard is basically a flat menu. He implemented a very, very nice hierarchical menu. And each of the participants in this challenge wrote their own kind of fun demo sites. We'll just go ahead and take a look at one of them. I encourage you to go take a look at all these. All the submissions are out there. There were about 22 submissions to the contest total. So this is an example of an Orchard site. He did some really great things. We're really pleased with this as well. So just giving some attention to those folks. The second place went to a smooth streaming module based on IIS smooth streaming to Daniel. And the third place went to Gabriel Eduardo Sheets de Mello for his image gallery control based on jQuery image gallery stuff. And it is a really flexible way to do kind of lightbox things. So there's a ton of stuff out here. Just want to congratulate those folks. So let's go ahead and take a look at Orchard as well. So I'm on the setup page here. And this is what you'll see when you first install Orchard. You can install Orchard with the web platform installer. You can install it by just downloading a zip and extracting it to IIS, pointing a virtual directory or a site at it. So there are a couple different ways. You can also just grab the MS Deploy zip from our Codeplex site, as well as enlist directly in the source tree if that's the way you prefer to work. That's a great way to work if you're interested in extending the system. You'll essentially be working just the way the Orchard team does. And with that, let's go ahead and take a look. So I want to highlight one of the first features we worked on, which is something called recipes. And so with the setup page, you now have a drop-down menu. And from this, you can kind of pick from various configurations of your site. We have a few in the box: default, blog, and core. The default is sort of just the basic features that we think most people are going to want to get started with. A blog is really tailored toward you're going to build a blog site. And core is very minimal. It's only the framework pieces and kind of no optional modules that you can kind of start if you really want to highly customize things. And so this is what I mean by setup automation. And if we go take a look at the modules in Orchard, all of the modules are under a modules folder in Orchard Web. This is a set of modules I have here. And so inside of the Orchard setup, there's a recipes folder now. And inside of here, a recipe is just an XML file. What we think of recipes is sort of a way that you can create these vertical distributions of Orchard. We imagine the community will deliver a number of these. We'll eventually want to support these in our gallery. So you can imagine like a commerce distribution of Orchard, or anything you can think of, various kind of vertical distributions of sites. We're going to go ahead and make a custom recipe, but I'll show you what the blog looks like. It's basically an XML file, and it has some properties about that. You can enable features directly from a recipe. You can turn them on and off. You can define all the metadata inside of Orchard. So, what content types are in the system, what parts and fields are welded onto those content types. That's really gets at the heart of some of the customizability in Orchard you'll see today. You can set site settings, for example. You can run database migrations for individual features. And Orchard actually has a command line interface as well, so that's a way that modules can expose very custom commands, and you can run any of those from a recipe as well. So let's go ahead and make a custom recipe. So I'm going to copy the blog recipe to one that I call MIX11 recipe.xml. And for this, I should zoom in here. I know you probably can't see. So let's do MIX11. So it's a recipe providing the features that Brad needs for his mix demo. And then I'm going to go ahead and copy in some stuff here and explain what I'm doing. So we're going to base this on the blog recipe. I'm going to add a couple other tags here. So what I've added is some module tags. And what that does is it'll actually go out to the gallery, download and install those modules to the modules folder. And you can specify a specific version, or you can leave the version off, and it will get the latest recommended version of any of those modules. So we're going to install some modules I'll use during my demo. I'm also downloading one theme from the gallery, Contoso, and I'm setting it to be the current theme as part of this recipe. And then I'm going to just adjust the feature section. And so I'm basically turning on the features for the various modules that I've installed. Do one last thing. I'm going to set a couple of site settings just because it's convenient and I don't want to forget to set them. So just a couple of settings, and I'll explain. This one's just for one of the parts that I'm going to use, and this is just the base URL for the site. It's an optional setting, but one of the modules I use happens to require it. OK. And you can certainly do any of this stuff from the admin panel as well, right? So let's go ahead and save that. And if I refresh over here, so let's give this a site name. We'll call it Orchard at Mix. I'll specify a password. I can choose SQL Server Compact as my database, or SQL Server, or SQL Server Express. I'm just going to use the SQL Server Compact. It just is a simple file system-based database. I can copy deploy. And you can see my MIX11 recipe is showing up. I'll pick that, and we'll go ahead and finish that. Now we're going out to the network here, and I'm actually going to do that several times in this demo, so let's hope this network is reliable. You can see that it's cooking a recipe. We thought that was kind of cute. And if we go out to Orchard Web here, the modules directory, we're going to watch those modules get pulled down. So it's going out to the web, going out to that gallery site that I just showed you, and it's grabbing all those modules and dropping them in. A module's just like a little, they're based on MVC. They're like mini MVC apps based on the MVC areas technology. They use Razor syntax for their templating support. And so we're going to look a bit more closely at modules. But basically, it's just a folder. Kind of looks like an MVC app. If you drop into it, it's got controllers, views, models, that kind of stuff. And it's done. So I've landed on my page. I set my custom theme. And let's go ahead and browse around a little bit. So first thing I'm going to do is pop into the admin panel. As you'll notice, we've actually given it a fresh new look. If you're familiar with 1.0, if you're not familiar with 1.0, this probably just looks like the way you'd expect it to look anyway. So we've got a nice new dashboard. We flattened out the left side navigation a bit, made it quite a lot simpler. Some of the stuff in 1.0 was a bit redundant. And let's go ahead and drop into the modules section of the admin panel and take a look at what we just pulled in from the recipe. So from this recipe, I pulled in a bunch of features. I've turned them on. All those features that I wanted, for example, I pulled down this date time field. I turned on this warm-up feature. I turned on content sharing as a custom module from the gallery. And kind of the Twitter widget. All those things that I pulled down from the gallery are already lit up and ready for me to go. I don't have to go click around and enable them all individually. We've also kind of consolidated everything about modules in one place here. So I can see the features I have. I can also see the gallery directly from inside of the admin panel. So this is actually just going against an OData feed that's exposed from that gallery website. And so you can see all the modules available for Orchard here. I have a little indicator of which ones I have installed. And I can certainly install them directly from here as well. So lots of different ways to get the modules into my site. And I want to go ahead and just show like the experience for installing a single module, what that kind of looks like. So let's go grab this recipe commands since we're talking about recipes so much. Just an optional module. It adds some commands to the Orchard command line interface for running recipes after setup, so that if you want to point it at an XML file, you can run them in series and they'll just merge. So we have setup recipes, but we also have the ability to run recipes after the fact. And a module itself can, in fact, contain recipes. And when you enable that module, it'll prompt you as to whether or not you want to run that recipe at that time also. So at this point, this is new also. We have, once I've installed a module, it directs me straight to a page where I can turn the feature on, so I don't have to go back to the features page and hunt around for it. These are some of those workflow improvements I was talking about. So I'll go ahead and turn that on. And recipe commands was enabled, as we would expect. We'll see it a little bit later. So themes actually looks quite a bit the same. We still have the installed and gallery tabs. It looks just like modules, so I can see all the themes available for Orchard. And I have that Contoso theme that I pulled down. I can also see that I have updates. So this is new. We'll go ahead and detect if there's a later version on the gallery than one that you have installed, and so we'll notify you if there's something else there. So I can see there's a 1.1 version of Contoso that was just published, and I'll go ahead and install that. If you looked carefully, my recipe explicitly specified the version 1.0 just so I could show you the updates tab. Cool. All right, so we've got the Contoso. And by the way, themes, like I said, they're just themes and modules are just things you can drop into a folder. So I'm just going to grab a few more themes just to kind of make it fun. So we'll go to here, just grab some themes. So I can just copy those straight into the themes folder for my site. Go back here, go to themes, and I'm just going to paste in this stuff. And we'll come back here, hit refresh, and you'll notice I'll get a bunch more themes here. So really, it's just copy and paste if that's all you want to do. Great. So we did a few more nice little things, kind of cleaned up the way themes look. But let's go ahead and start focusing on building our site. We've got some themes, we've got some modules, we're sort of ready to go. So that's the setup part of it. So back on this site, I used the blog recipe as the basis for my site. So it made a blog the homepage. Just as kind of an aside, Orchard's a content management system. Fundamentally, you can build any kind of site you want with this. You have complete control over everything. You have complete control over the rendering. This is not a blog engine. So just kind of setting the expectations there. I'm showing you a blog because it's convenient, but just note that it's a CMS in every sense of the word. And so let's jump right in. So I'm going to go edit from the front end some blog properties. I want to get rid of this description. I'm going to change this to, say, latest articles and posts. Go ahead and save that. Just kind of clean up what my blog looks like. And I also want to get a little bit of blog content, and I'm going to do that kind of conveniently using that command line interface that I mentioned. So at orchard.web is the root of the website. It's kind of where you would point your IIS virtual directory if you needed to. And I can run bin/orchard. So there's an orchard exe inside of the bin directory. You want to run it from within orchard web. And when I run this, we'll spin up a little host for Orchard so that we can access the set of commands that are available from all of the enabled modules. Okay. And to see the available commands, I can type help commands. And there's a ton of commands here I can run. You can see some of those recipe commands that I mentioned before. One of them from the module we just installed. And I'm going to run this blog import command. It's kind of a demo. It's a demo helper, if anything. We have a blogml import module on the gallery written by someone from the community. But I'm just going to go ahead and run this because it's convenient, and we'll get some data very quickly into the site. So somewhere I have a little set of snippets here. Let's grab this. Oh, did I not copy that? Yeah, there we go. So I'm just going to pull in some blogs right off the Orchard project homepage. These are blog posts from various community members. And if I hit refresh, we'll see some content. Okay. So it looks like we're all ready to go here. Should be able to come out here. So yeah, so I've got a little bit of blog content here. So next thing I want to do is, pardon my notes. Yeah, so let's go ahead and start customizing a little bit this Contoso recipe, or this Contoso theme. So Contoso as a theme has some instructions in it, and if anyone's used Contoso from 1.0, you're familiar with this. So right at the root, if I zoom in, there's some instructions on how to create some widgets, and I can, what it does is it tells me to create a couple of widgets for Orchard. That's sort of a manual process as it was in 1.0, but with some new features we can actually really automate this. I'm going to go ahead and use a new feature called import-export to get these widgets very quickly into my site. And so if I come back here, first of all, the new widget UI, which we're going to come back to, I'll explain quite a bit about, has been cleaned up significantly. So adding widgets to the site basically allows you to map the islands of content to different zones that are exposed by the theme, and every theme can define what zones it wants to expose. We also have this concept of layers, which are sort of rules about when a widget should render. So the default layer just kind of says it renders everywhere across the site, wherever that zone appears. But there are other layers that I can add, like maybe I want certain widgets to appear only when a user is authenticated or when they're anonymous. We also have one specifically for the home page that says only render this widget on the home page. So we're going to use some of those. And for the Contoso widgets, I have a recipe file called import Contoso widgets. And this is just imports the data from Contoso, its set of instructions. And if I go out here, we'll go to import-export, can choose a file, and we'll grab that import Contoso widgets and hit go. So the import format for Orchard is simply a recipe file. It is restricted to only data, metadata, and settings. So it doesn't run commands or pull things down from the gallery, for example. You wouldn't want someone to email you an import file and have it take over admin control on your site or something. And we also have the ability to export, which we're going to leverage a little bit later in the demo. So I went ahead and pulled in those widgets. And if I come back here, I now have a couple of widgets here, an HTML widget and a headline widget, and we'll go out to the front end of the site just to check them out. So this is just something that comes with Contoso, a nice little image slider, and a tagline for my site. And let's go explore this widgets UI in a little bit more detail. So I'm going to go ahead and pick the home page layer. We're going to pop back. We're going to actually go in and edit this featured image. So the first thing, the default images that Contoso comes with tell you to change me now. And so let's go ahead and do that, and I'll be able to highlight yet another feature in Orchard 1.1. So we focused a bit on media management as well. In 1.0, you could upload media, but it was not very convenient to go browse for media that you'd previously uploaded and reinserted into content, or to modify the media that you had already inserted into content. And so to do that, I'm going to go ahead and click the new media dialog. And you can see a nice little thumbnail here, and I can go browse for some new images. I'm going to go ahead and upload that, and I can just update right in place. So that's convenient and new. Okay, so I've got some fancy pictures of Orchard 1.1. And I also want to update this featured headline. So to change that to something for my site. So we'll say orchard 1.1 is here. And I believe in my snippets file I have some nice little HTML I can use here. Actually, we'll just paste that. Cool. So got a couple of widgets. Let's go check it out, see what it looks like. Okay, starting to come together. Have my little tagline about Orchard. So let's go ahead and add one more widget. So one thing to kind of point out about themes in Orchard is that notice that I have no sidebar here in my site, but the theme does define a zone called content aside. And the nice thing about this is it's in a layout file inside of Orchard. And it's written in such a way that when you put content into it, that zone will expand and appear. So it's a kind of a nice way that you can have, as a theme author, you can just specify a bunch of zones, and they'll sort of collapse when they don't have content. So I'll go ahead and add another widget to my sidebar. And in this case, I only want the widget to appear on the home page, so I'll pick the home page as my layer. Just to kind of point out how these layers work, if I drop in here, you can see there's a rule that says URL // that sort of says for this location of the site, this rule is in effect, and any of the widgets I put in that layer will be effective. I can define as many URL-based rules as I want. There's a URL layer rule provider inside of Orchard, and that is, again, another extensibility hook. You can write custom providers as well. For example, someone wrote something in the gallery that allows you to define a layer based on the tags for certain content items, for example. So it's all extensible that way. And if I come out here, we will add to the content aside layer Twitter search widget. So that was one of the widgets that I installed with my recipe. This is also one of the contributions that came out of that Orchard module challenge. And let's go ahead and add it to the content aside. I'm going to call it recent tweets and just give it a little search query, Orchard CMS. Oh, that's not right. Orchard CMS. I'll take all the rest of the defaults. If we come out here. Nice. So now I have a recent tweets widget on my sidebar. My home page is starting to come together. So in addition to kind of customizing the home page, you can certainly add new pages. So I'll go ahead and add a new page here. We'll call this About. And inside of this, let's see, I'm just going to grab some content off of the Orchard project site. If you've ever seen any of my demos, I always include this little thing. These are the members of the Orchard team. And we'll go ahead and just paste some content into the rich text editor, give it some tags, and go ahead and show that on the main menu, and hit publish. And one of the new features in 1.1, so the layer concept, I was explaining how that works, was kind of confusing some people. It's a powerful and very flexible way to render widgets via multiple rules and have some kind of all those things aggregate at runtime, and you can kind of control relative positioning between all the active layers. However, it's something that I think people were kind of overlooking, and we're trying to figure out how to get widgets to appear on certain pages. And so there's a little notification here that it just prompts me, do I want to add a layer for my About Us page? And it's just a convenient one-step way to just say, yeah, I want a layer. And now I have a new layer specifically for About Us if I wanted to map widgets to that page. So a little bit more convenient there than trying to define the URLs and stuff yourself. I'm not going to go ahead and add any widgets to that layer. Just wanted to point the feature out. So one of the really compelling things in Orchard is the content type system. And kind of under the hood, there's a whole metadata system that defines how content types are defined in the system. And you can weld on kind of fields and parts to content types. So I'm going to give you some examples, and I think it'll make a lot of sense when you see it. So for the blog post, for example, I'd like to add a couple of parts that are exposed by modules that I downloaded in my recipe. So I'll click on Edit and Add Parts. And I'm going to add the stars and the share bar part to a blog post. And if I come out back to the front end, you can see that I have now a way to rate these blog posts. I have a way to tweet them, to share them, and I actually see those parts showing up on both the summary and the details page. We're going to show a little bit about how you can customize that, to show where you want things to appear. We'll get to that a little bit later in the demo. But really, adding parts is just a way to add reusable things, to the types in the system. You can also define your own content types. And so I'm going to go create a new content type called event. And we're going to make a little list of events for this site. And on an event, I'd like, basically I want the body, a common part, which is something that is common, as the name suggests, to all content types. We also have the containable part, and I'm adding this specifically because I know I want to create a list of these things, and I want the list to be able to contain them. So we have this notion of container and containable. I'm adding containable to my event. I'll go ahead and add publish later, which lets me publish now or on a schedule. You've already seen me kind of use that UI. We'll add route. We'll add some tags, and that's about it. So I've added some parts here. Now, because this is an event, I want to go ahead and add a couple of custom fields. So the thing about parts is you can add, once you add a part, you only add the part once to any type. It kind of is roughly equivalent to the type, whereas the field, you can add multiple of them of different types. And all that stuff is extensible as well. So I have a couple of fields here, a text field and a date time field that I pulled down from the gallery. So I'm going to have a date for my event. And I'm also going to add a location for my event. Oh, and I added it of the wrong type. Let's remove that and add it again. Text field is what I want for location. Okay, so that's my type. Let's go ahead and hit save. Let's go back out. Sorry. So one thing that you'll notice is I have a new event. I can create a new one. And we'll just go ahead and create one really quickly. So we're going to grab some content here for my title. It'll be the title of this talk. We'll go ahead and give it the location, which is down here. And some body content. And that should be today at 11:30 a.m. Go ahead and say Orchard Mix 1.1 and publish that event. So I've created an event, and it's got a permalink here. Now I didn't go ahead and add the menu part, so I didn't add it to the menu. But if I go out to my site, I can see that when I go to the route for that event, that route does exist. And now we're going to go ahead and create a list of those things. So list was one of the places that we invested in Orchard 1.1. It's just a way to create basically a container of content items. So I can create a new list, and we'll call it events. And on events, I can say what it contains. So I can contain any content type, or I can choose any of the content types in the system with the containable part on it. So I'm going to pick the event. We'll order by date created ascending. And I'll add it to the menu out front, so we'll call it events. And I'll also add it to the menu, let's see, to the admin menu itself. Okay, a little bit of wrapping issues because of the screen resolution. Just ignore that. So I've got an events list, and it has no content items in it, but I've already created an event. So I want a really convenient way to add that to my list. So I can choose items, or I can create events directly inside of this list. So choosing items lets me go and choose any of the items that are not currently in a list. By the way, a content item essentially can only be in one list at a time. That's just a limitation of the way lists are implemented today. It's certainly something that we're revisiting and working on. And so here, now I can see that I have that event, and I can pick this, and I can choose to move it straight to my events list. So it's just a quick chooser to go add any existing items. And then I can create more events here. So if we go out to the site, we'll go ahead and see that I have events, and there's my event. And I want to add a couple of more. I'd like to go ahead and use the import-export feature again. So we'll go to import-export, and I'm just going to dump out an export here and explain a little bit about how export works. So with export, I can choose any of the content types in my system. I can pick event, for example, and then I can choose what I want to export from those content types. In this case, I want to export metadata, data, and settings. And those are the three things you can export. So metadata is kind of all the parts and fields and how they weld onto types. And it's like the schema of the system. The data is obviously the set of content items that fulfill that schema, and are the items in your site. And I can choose whether I want to export published versions or just draft versions. And then site settings are pretty self-explanatory. It's any of the global settings for my site, some of which your content types or your parts might need. So that's essentially what export looks like today. And what it will dump is a recipe file. And I can go out here, copy that, and we're just going to open that up. Let me zoom in a little bit. So you can see the metadata, all the parts and fields. I can see the settings, for example, and somewhere I have data, and the event that we just created. Now I want to go ahead and add a couple more. I went ahead and previously exported a site, and so we'll go ahead and grab that XML here. Oh, I think it's in my snippets file. Okay, so here's some XML that I'm just going to go ahead and copy into that other file that we're looking at. Let's see, where do I want it? It's event. So here. So we'll just save that, and I should be able to come back and rerun that. One really nice thing about import-export is that it merges, and so you don't have to worry about if there's already stuff that is already there or something. Especially metadata, for example, if you have a bunch of schema, you certainly don't want it recreating or doing that over and over again. So it does merge cleanly, and we'll go ahead back to import here. Choose that file that I just created. If I can remember where it is. I know where. It was sitting out here. Okay, so that's the thing that we exported. Let's see if we can get it re-imported. Recipe's been imported. Let's go back to the list of events. And there you go, a couple more events. So pretty quick way to kind of move your content items around between sites. That's import-export using the recipe format. Okay, so we've created a custom content type. We've created a list of those types. I also want to highlight a cool feature around how we've really made extensibility and customization work. And so for designers specifically, Orchard has a very unique rendering system that we use something we call shapes. It leverages the C# dynamic functionality. And so what this is a dynamic object with dynamic properties that any module in the system can kind of party on and bolt on things dynamically at runtime, so that every module can participate in the model, if you will, that's going to be used to render templates for front-end rendering. And although that sounds really geeky and flexible, it's also kind of difficult to understand. One of the problems with things being so dynamic is it's not like you have a file somewhere on disk that you can go look at to see what are the properties that sit on top of some object you can type in a template to access. And that was a real stumbling block for especially designers in particular wanting to override templates and figure out what they want to type inside of a template to access those things. And so we've introduced a new diagnostic tool called shape tracing that lets you really inspect the front end of the front end of the website and kind of highlight different parts of the site and see what's rendering what templates are rendering what, where they come from. Gives you the ability to override those templates and also tells you how you can type expressions to access shape properties in those templates. So that's a mouthful, I know. Let's see it in action. So I'm going to go to modules. And somewhere is shape tracing. I probably overlooked it. There we go. So shape tracing, let's go ahead and turn that on. And you can see down at the bottom here, there's this tiny little sliver of a window and a little button. We like to think of this as sort of like Firebug for Orchard or something, a way you can inspect things. So you can kind of click on this, and then up pops this little window, and I can kind of drag it up, or highlight over different parts of my site that I want to inspect, or highlight over various things in the shape tree down below. And I'll go ahead and say, for example, click on the user. That'll highlight the user object. You can see if I kind of move my mouse down here, you can kind of see up there that well, it's really hard to read on the. So the highlight is a very pale blue. I see it quite well, but just know that it's there. So I clicked on the user. I can see that I'm looking at the user object. And I can see a lot of things about the rendering now. I can see the shape, and I can see it's a user shape. I can see the active template that's rendering that shape. And the way templates work is every module is obviously going to include a bunch of views that render its own stuff. But theme designers or site authors are going to want to override that to change the rendering. And what we highly encourage is don't change the templates that are sitting inside of the module, because you want to be able to pull down updates to that module and not blow away all those customizations you just made. So the best thing to do is override those templates inside of a theme, and that's exactly what we're going to do. Here I have an active theme, Contoso. Now, granted, it's something I pulled from the gallery, and if I wanted to take updates to Contoso, I wouldn't want to override it here either. We do have a feature called theme inheritance. There's a way you can create themes that are based on others, and it'll fall back to various themes. So you could scaffold your own theme, base it on Contoso, and put overrides there. I'm not going to bother with that. We're just going to drop them in Contoso. But that sort of explains how we think the override stuff should work. And what's cool is that I can see alternate templates that I can create. So if I click on alternates, I see that I can create a user template inside of Contoso, and shape tracing will just let me drop that thing in so that I can customize it. And what if I want to know what I can type in that? I can see properties of the model. This particular shape is not all that interesting. We'll go pick another one. So let me go look at the title of a blog, for example. So we're looking at the title. We'll look at the alternates I can create. And so there are lots of different alternates I can create. I can override the way the title the way the title renders for a summary view of any content type, how the title looks for a summary view of this specific content type, the one I've selected, or content item, I should say. That's a content item ID. Or the title summary view of every blog post in the system, for example. So lots of different possible overrides I have and various alternates. And that's the one I'm going to use. Let's go ahead and just create that real quick. Okay, so shape tracing did that. Go back here and go select that again. Okay, so I can see my active template now is sitting in my Contoso theme. What if I want to know what I can type in that template? I can certainly come here. I can inspect the properties of the model or the dynamic properties that are on the shape. I can click on each one of those, and if you notice right here, there's a nice little expression that I can just copy directly into the template using the Razor syntax to go ahead and access that property. So I don't have to guess anymore at what are those properties on the shape that I can get. I can see information about the placement of items, and I can copy placement overrides into the placement information of the theme. Placement is a way that modules can say, here's where my stuff should render by default, and then again in a theme you can drop a placement info file at the root and change those, the zone and the position within the zone of anything that is rendered. I can see the contents of the template itself and what's being rendered today, and I can also see what's actually coming out as HTML to the browser. So pretty slick. Let's just go do something to this so that we can see it take effect. So I've got this. So it's rendering an H1. I'm just going to do something silly. Strong. Save that. Close it. Come back. Hit refresh. And there you go. It's not quite so big. It's bold or strong. And that override is now in effect. And it's only in effect for the summary view. So as you see, when I go to the details view, I haven't really overridden the way the title looks elsewhere in the site. And that's because of the way I specifically chose the alternate that I wanted. So let's go ahead and override a couple things. I'll demonstrate, let's see, let's demonstrate placement info a little bit. So for this particular share bar, I kind of don't want the share bar to appear on my summary view. I only want it to really be on my details view, for example. So to do that, I'm going to go back to the summary view. And by the way, with shape tracing turned on, it's still quite speedy for what it does, but it does kind of slow down the rendering of the site, just so you know. That's kind of why it's taking a little longer for it to render. So I got to turn on or flip up shape tracing. We'll go ahead and select the share bar. And it might be tempting to just override this template and clear the contents and make it disappear, which would work. But it's sort of like, I don't know, maybe it was Sebastian gave me this analogy. It's sort of like saying go to the store and buy nothing instead of saying don't go to the store. So what we want to do instead is just tell this thing not ever to render instead of giving it a template override inside of the theme. And so I'm going to go see the placement info. And this actually tells me the zone and the position in which this renders, always. And we're going to go ahead and customize that a little bit. So I can copy and paste this if I want. I have a little snippet here, so we're just going to go crack open the placement info inside of Contoso. And inside of here, I'm going to drop in some new stuff. So what I have here is a match expression, and it says, for the content type blog post, when it's displaying in summary view, place the share bar part. And I could have given it an alternate zone and position or something. I could throw it out into the sidebar or whatever. But what I would prefer to do is just put a dash, and that'll just tell it don't render at all. And that's specifically for the summary view of the blog post. So we go hit refresh. And it's gone. And if I go out here, the share bar is still there. So it kind of gives you an idea of how you can make things disappear. So a couple other things. I think we've talked about the model a little bit. Talked about, there's a couple other kind of neat little things I want to show you. So if we go out to events, for example, I could click on an event content type. Oops, here. And we have now in 1.1 a very convenient way to get at all the parts kind of in a very quick way. So if I look at the model, right on the model, I have the content item. Is that right? Content item? I have content item. Looking to my cohort over there. And on this, I can see all the various parts, one of which is the event part. I can drill into that, and I can access all the fields, for example. Like specifically, I have date and location. If I click on this, to access that date, model.content item.event.date. That's a really convenient, simple syntax to get at very specific things. For those of you using Orchard 1.0, you'll know that this syntax was not possible with 1.0. We made it very, very convenient. The expressions are nice and simple and small to get to paste them into the template. So that was one thing I wanted to show you. Another thing I want to mention is this notion of URL alternates. So if I go to models and turn on URL alternates, it's an optional feature that gives me much more flexibility in terms of where I can put template overrides. And so if I come out here back to shape tracing and I go back to a shape, should just maybe let's go ahead and pick that blog post title again just for fun. So instead of like the 3 alternates that I had before, I now have several more that are URL based. So well, I have 3 more. And you'll have different URL alternates for different shapes that you select. But in this way, I can say I want to change the title, blog post title, or I want to change all titles in summary display mode on the home page, or or for blog posts only on the home page. And that's really, really convenient. Well, often we were getting the question from folks on 1.0, how can I, just for this little section of my site or just for this page, how can I just override the template there and nowhere else? And URL alternates is this nice optional feature that gives you many more alternates that you can use. So with that, I want to just, in the last 11 minutes here, I want to talk a little bit about the anatomy of a module, and also kind of talk a little bit about some of the deployment optimizations that we made. So let's talk a bit about modules first. So we were using the Orchard command line before, and I want to point out that we have a command to scaffold and generate a module. You can do that, with or without a tool like Visual Studio or something. I'm going to crack open Visual Studio here in a sec to show you the file contents, but for the most part, they are your tools are optional. So if I do help commands. Oh, I haven't enabled the CodeGen module. Let's go like feature enable orchard.code generation, I think. Well, here, I'm going to do something else, just to show you that you can. If you want to know what you can enable, you can always say feature list. I'll say summary true. That shows me all the features and whether or not they're enabled and disabled. One of them should be Orchard code generation. So yeah, I could copy that, for example, and then just say feature enable Orchard code generation. And now if I type help commands, so this is a scenario. I'm a developer. I want to build a module. I want to quickly scaffold that module. I can use code generation to do that, wire up the project in Visual Studio if I happen to be using Visual Studio, and I'm off and running. So CodeGen, so I have a bunch of CodeGen commands. CodeGen controllers, data migrations, modules, and themes. You can optionally include them in the solution and so on. I just wanted you to be aware of that. As well as there's a new module out on the gallery that also does code generation even better than we did it in the box. So I'd encourage you to go look for that CodeGen module out there as well. Let's see if I can find it, but let's do CodeGen. Yeah, so Pid wrote a code generation extensions module that actually allows you to specify all the properties that you want on your model, and it'll scaffold many more files than we will for you. So I'd encourage you to take a look at that as well if you're interested in building modules. And so I'm just going to copy in a module that I've already pre-built, but we're just going to kind of quickly look at what does a module look like under the hood. So we'll go to modules. I'll go ahead and crack this modules folder open. Oops. Explore. Okay. And go out to my files, my modules. So I've got this very simple. It's a very simplistic module, but it's nice because I can kind of just quickly show you what's the basics behind a module. Go ahead and paste that. Let's go back to the dashboard. So what this is a simple maps module. I'll click on maps to enable it, and for example, what it does is exposes a map part that I can put on any type. So we'll go to my event, and I'll add this map part, and then I should be able to go out to like my list of events. Click on this, and I can specify just going to grab a latitude and longitude just to show you that the map actually works. Oops. Save that. So, that's the one that I edited. So I've got a little map here, and you can see it renders slightly differently or slightly larger in the details view. So that's basically what it does. If we go, let's crack open Visual Studio. So this is what the Orchard solution file looks like when you're enlisted in our source tree. Enlisting is a cinch, and we've got great instructions out on our site for doing that. We use Tortoise HG as a client in the Mercurial SourceForge. So all the modules are out here as projects, and if I right-click, I can say Add Existing Project. When I scaffold, I can just choose to add the project directly. And so if we go out here to Orchard Web, should be able to find modules, maps, and I can grab that project file. It's kind of interesting. Modules are, they're projects, top-level projects in the solution, but they're actually physically located underneath Orchard Web, as you've seen. So if I show all files here, you can see that that modules folder is there, but we just, for convenience sake, we go ahead and I'll just unshow all files. We go ahead and wire up projects to the solution this way. So a module kind of looks like this. I'm definitely bumping up against the clock. We're going to make this really quick. Maybe, if Visual Studio cooperates. I like my notepad better. Okay, cool. So a module just has a manifest. It's kind of like a recipe. It just had some metadata about it. It has, in this case, I've got a migration file. A migration is the thing that when you enable a module, it's going to determine how it sets up database records. So this thing uses a helper in Orchard, this schema builder, to define latitude and longitude properties. And then we can also use, these are true migrations. So as you publish new versions of your module, you can always specify additional methods that know how to upgrade from previous versions. And we'll keep track of what version you're on in the database so that if someone's on version 1 and they grab version 3, we know to go ahead and run the migration for 2 and 3 to get them up to the right schema. So that's kind of how this works. And it's leveraging an API called the Content Definition Manager, which is your API level way to access the content type system in Orchard and alter things. So here's a way that programmatically from code, I'm welding parts and settings and things onto my type, which in this case is a simple map part. I've got models. So the model is just the map record with a couple of properties on it, and a part, which is wrapping those properties and deriving from a content part in Orchard. So fairly simple. There's a handler a handler's a little like a filter in MVC, and here we're just kind of attaching or declaring that we want to add a storage filter for a repository of map records, and this will sort of wire it up so that the ORM underneath the hood in Orchard can dynamically create the schema in the database based on my model and expose that as a repository that I can access. I also have a driver, which is a bit more like a controller in MVC. This is a way that I can specify what should happen on display and what should happen on the editor view. So where I was entering the latitude and longitude, for example. And in this case, I've got some bogus code here I forgot about. Just nuke that. But in this case, this is where I'm defining shapes. So I'm using some helpers here, this content shape helper or the shape helper here, to define a dynamic object called parts map. This is the shape name and the model that I want to expose on that. So here I can say, longitude, and I want to use the longitude property of the part, which is passed in here. And so this is a way that I can dynamically kind of customize the actual properties that are going to become the model that gets passed to that template, and that's what you saw in shape tracing. I also define another shape specifically for the summary view so that those things are independently overridable. And lastly, I've got some templates out here. So, and it's just a really simple template. So I've got an image tag that's grabbing model.latitude and model.longitude, and then I've also got an editor template, which is using very familiar MVC code to do the text box and validation on those text boxes for the editor that you saw on the part. And that's in just a nutshell kind of what what a module looks like that defines a part in the most simplistic way. And also, just something I forgot to point out here, it was both a part and a widget. So a widget is really nothing more than a part that you've declared you've declared as a widget as well. So here I've used the content manager, definition manager, to say this thing's a map widget as well. And it has, or that I have another type called map widget that has these parts on it: common, the widget stereotype, the widget part, and my map part. So defining a widget is nothing more than adding, mucking with the metadata in Orchard. Okay, with like 30 seconds or less to spare, unfortunately I don't think we're going to get to deploy, which maybe not be the worst thing in the world. The network connection here is pretty bad, and my dry run didn't work so well. But it works, and one of the things that we did in Orchard 1.1 was really improve deployment in a few places. So when you publish from Visual Studio, you no longer have to remember to include all files when you publish, which is something you had to do with 1.0. And that's kind of an artifact of the fact that we have things that are outside of the solution in the Orchard web. You saw when I said show all files, it showed a bunch of other things. But now we really hook into the Orchard, or to the Visual Studio Extensive MS Deploy system to grab only the files that we need to publish the site. So you can leave the default settings in VS and it'll just publish just fine using MS Deploy. We've also really optimized the number of files that we're going to send over the wire. So when you build in Visual Studio, it actually copies assembly references around into the bin directories of all the sub-projects for modules, which kind of bloats the size of an Orchard enlistment, especially in an enlistment. And what we've done with the publish mechanism is hook into that and make sure that we only build and send over the wire what we need. So it's about 35 meg, I think, total that goes over the wire. So it's a lot better than it was and should publish quite seamlessly. You can also certainly publish using Web Matrix or RMS Deploy Zip and stuff. All that works quite well. We have some wiki tutorials out there already, and we'll be putting some more deployment guidance out there here pretty soon. And the last thing we did is in shared hosting environments, the characteristics of Orchard of shared hosting environments in general is that hosting providers tend to aggressively recycle app domains so that they can increase their site density. And so that kind of often makes your site constantly have to bootstrap itself and spin up the app domain again. So we added a feature called Warm Up. Unfortunately, I'm not sure I'm going to have the chance to show it, but it's an optional feature you can turn on, which I have turned on here. It's under Settings. And if I click on Settings, you can just specify URLs that you want to warm up. So I could say about us and / for example. I can say I want to generate warm-up pages periodically or regenerate them when I publish new content. And what this will do is it'll drop static versions of those files that will get served instantaneously when someone requests those URLs. And in the background, we're going to warm up Orchard so that the next request comes in serves the real dynamic content. It works well for several scenarios, not for everything. There's some guidance out there on how to use it. But we tested it out pretty thoroughly in shared hosting environments and should really dramatically increase the speed of your sites, especially under those kind of conditions. So that's Orchard 1.1 in a nutshell. I've got some things to give away. I'm going to go ahead and hop off the stage so I can let the next presenter get set up. And so I've got some giveaways here, as well as we're hosting an event just after this, immediately after this. I'm going to walk over to a room. I know that you probably have a lot of questions, and I anticipated we might have a lot of questions as a result of the keynote. So I've got some cards up here as to where we're going to be. For the next hour and a half, I will be in this room. Sebastian, who's with me from the Orchard developer team, will be in the room. And the Orchard team will be remoted in over live meetings. So you can just talk to all of us and ask whatever deep technical questions you've got about Orchard. And I'm pretty sure somebody in the room will be able to answer any question you can throw at us. So with that, I want to thank everybody very much for coming to the Orchard session. I hope you saw some exciting stuff, and I hope you have a great mix.